They were willing to make up a rule. Those are Denny Hamlin's own words. Not a rumor. Not a misquote. The championship leader of NASCAR walked into a hauler, made every offer he could think of, and came out saying the sanctioning body was prepared to invent a penalty to force him into a car he believed was dangerous. What could push a driver with 64 Cup Series victories to the edge of refusing to race? The answer involves brake pads, an impound race, a hauler confrontation, and a rule that most of the sport didn't even know existed until last weekend. Before we get into how we got here, this is exactly the kind of story this channel exists for, getting past the headline and into the rulebook, breaking down what actually happened versus what was reported. If that is what you came here for, hit like and subscribe right now. Let's get into it. Denny Hamlin has not been good at Iowa Speedway. He finished 24th in 2024. He finished 24th again in 2025. Heading into 2026, he had 0 top 10 finishes at the .875-mile oval in Newton, Iowa. So he did something that required genuine humility. He borrowed a setup from 2311 Racing, an organization that had been fast at that track. In his own words, I kind of wanted to lean on their setups a little bit more this time around, since I hadn't had success at this racetrack quite yet. That detail matters, because the first theory that circulated was that Hamlin was experimenting ahead of the postseason. He rejected that directly. The brake package had been run roughly 20 times across JGR cars. His reasoning with crew chief Chris Gale was simple. If they were ever going to try a proven alternative, now was the time, not September. His conclusion afterward was precise. I am pretty confident it was a bad batch of actual brake pads. On Saturday, within moments of the number 11 car hitting the track in practice, the problem announced itself. Within 2 to 3 laps, the brake pedal dropped to the floor. Gale knew immediately this could end their race before the green flag ever waved. It was not confined to one car. Chase Briscoe in the number 19 suffered identical symptoms. Crew chief James Small described the state of Briscoe's brake pads in a single blunt word: destroyed. 2311 Racing's Riley Herbst and crew chief Davin Restivo were dealing with it too. Bubba Wallace's number 23 joined all 3 in the garage. All 4 cars spent well into the morning hours trying to find a fix. Here is the detail that proves this was a package problem. Legacy Motor Club, the other Tier 1 Toyota organization, had 0 issues. Car chief Austin Pollock explained it plainly. JGR and 2311 run a different package than we do. The pads worked for a handful of laps, long enough to qualify, nowhere near long enough to race 350 laps. Hamlin qualified around 30th. Chase Elliott qualified 32nd after crashing in practice. Here is what almost nobody knew before last weekend. Iowa was an impound race. Once technical inspection is complete, the race setup is locked. NASCAR does allow teams to bleed brake lines with no penalty. Teams can change cracked rotors with no penalty. Both the number 11 and number 35 teams made that change. Teams can even swap calipers with a drop to the rear of the field. But brake pads cannot be changed. Not with a penalty. Not with any workaround. The reasoning behind the distinction is coherent. Calipers, brake lines, and master cylinders are single-source parts mandated by NASCAR. Because NASCAR supplies them, it accepts responsibility when one proves defective and therefore allows a swap. Brake pads are not single-sourced. Each team selects its own compound based on track and driving style. NASCAR classifies that choice as setup, not a safety component. Hamlin summarized the trap precisely. It puts you in a box to where if you've made the wrong decision or you have what we deem as defective pads, I can't get out of the box. The only legal remedy was to go behind the wall after the race started, destroying any competitive meaning from the afternoon. That is the situation Denny Hamlin and team owner Joe Gibbs carried into the NASCAR hauler. Hamlin's argument was not about lap time. It was about physics, the risk of a rotor explosion, arriving at a corner unable to slow the car, hitting a wall head-on, and collecting other drivers. He acknowledged NASCAR's counterposition as legitimate. We do not want 36 teams having a qualifying brake pad and a race brake pad. Then he offered to be punished. He offered to start on pit lane. NASCAR responded. That's not the way it's written right now. He escalated, volunteering a 2-race penalty. Start on pit lane at Iowa and at the rear at Richmond Raceway the following weekend. His logic: that's enough to where you ain't going to be screwing around. No one wants to take that penalty. NASCAR declined again. Then came the nuclear option. Hamlin floated, refusing to drive entirely. What if I just tell the team? Nope, I will not go out on the racetrack with those brake pads. Absolutely not. I'm too old to be hitting this wall head-on. The response, as Hamlin reported it, was that NASCAR would make up a penalty worse than simply coming in under green to change the pads. His reaction was resignation. Well, I guess I just got to go slower then. And his wish was clear. I wish there was an asterisk at the bottom of it, saying, but we will use common sense. Most coverage stopped there. This one does not. Mike Ford, VP of Racing Communications at NASCAR, addressed it directly on the Hauler Talk podcast. He conceded that Hamlin told the story fairly. Then came the substance. NASCAR's position is that discretionary penalties already exist in the rulebook. Changing those pads after leaving the hauler would constitute disobeying a NASCAR directive, written language, triggering a discretionary penalty of whatever severity officials judged appropriate. Ford floated the range openly. A 3-lap penalty, a 5-lap penalty, a 20-lap penalty, whatever officials judged appropriate. Both accounts can be true simultaneously. Hamlin experienced it as authority inventing a punishment. NASCAR understood it as applying an existing discretionary provision. The disagreement comes down to 2 words: make up. Then Ford volunteered the most revealing detail of the entire episode. During Monday's debrief, he asked his colleagues, if NASCAR had relented and let the number 11 change pads, how hot would the garage get on a scale of 1 to 10? Brad Moran answered, 10. Chief Inspector Brian Goel said, 11. Common sense extended to one team on Saturday night becomes a precedent 35 other teams will invoke every future weekend. On Sunday morning, Chris Gale changed the brake cooling ducts on the number 11 car, an unapproved adjustment. The qualifying result was thrown out and Hamlin was sent to the rear. Gale described the fix as a 50-50 proposition. It did not work. Hamlin described his headspace before the green flag. This was the worst mindset I've ever had going into a race. I never felt beat before a race started, and I thought I was done today. By lap 3, the pedal was on the floor. Briscoe described the rhythm all afternoon. I would have a restart, and it would be good for 5 or 6 laps, then right back to the floor. Hamlin said he just had to white-knuckle every lap, obviously not knowing where my car was going to land when I got into the corner. The result was staggering. Hamlin finished 5th, his first career top 10 at Iowa Speedway. Briscoe finished 6th. 2 cars with failing brakes placed 5th and 6th, Joe Gibbs afterward. I've never seen Denny that exhausted. I think he drove his heart out. Hamlin delivered the line that traveled furthest. I'd retire at the end of the year if I had to do that every week, that's for sure. But his actual verdict cut against the doom framing entirely. The team did an amazing job. I would take that day 100 out of 100 times. On the retirement question, this must be labeled as speculation. Hamlin is 45 years old, the oldest full-time Cup Series driver. His contract with JGR runs through 2027, his stated final deal. He sits at 64 career wins and has acknowledged catching Dale Earnhardt's 76 is unrealistic, and is at peace with that. His successor already exists, Brent Cruz, 18 years old, working through the JGR development system. Co-owner Heather Gibbs has publicly called Hamlin a spring chicken. His answer: check back in 6 months. Whether a day, like Iowa, accelerates that decision is genuinely unknown. On the championship picture, Hamlin entered Iowa with an 84-point lead over Tyler Reddick. He left with a 103-point lead over Ty Gibbs, who won the race and climbed from 4th to 2nd. Reddick's afternoon lasted 4 laps before his car broke loose, collected Eric Jones, and both slammed the outside wall. Reddick classified 36th, dropping from 2nd to 4th, now 120 points behind. His own assessment: it's the type of stuff you don't do to yourself and you don't do to a teammate. Kyle Larson was eliminated as well, collected in a four-wide incident on lap 149 when John Hunter Nemechek forced him up the track, finished 33rd, 18 laps down. Christopher Bell finished second for the 7th time this season, 4th time in 5 races, calling it a bad second-place finish for sure. Richmond Raceway is next, Saturday, August 15th, a track where Hamlin has won 5 times and notably the exact track where he offered to start at the rear as a penalty. The regular season ends, and the chase opens at Darlington Raceway on September 4th, with the regular season leader beginning with a 25-point cushion. The debate is genuinely unresolved. NASCAR was right that any exception instantly becomes a loophole. The garage said 10 out of 10 on the anger scale, and rules exist for competitive fairness, not individual convenience. But Hamlin had a point too. A pit lane start at Iowa plus a rear-of-field start at Richmond is a severe enough punishment that no rational team abuses it. There is a meaningful difference between a setup choice and a defective product. The rule as written created a real safety risk on track. This wasn't a story about brakes. It was a story about where the rulebook ends and common sense begins, and whether those two things can ever be in the same place at the same time. If you made it this far, this channel is brand new and genuinely trying to build something worth watching. Real analysis, real rulebook breakdowns, real stories behind the headlines. If that is valuable to you, please hit like and subscribe. Every single subscriber matters as we work toward 2,000. Your support makes this possible. Now drop your take in the comments. Was Hamlin's offer a reasonable compromise, or the first step down a slope NASCAR cannot climb back up?